Welcome everyone to today's CSIA Masterclass, Improving Your Business Practices. My name is Colin Hammond and I will be your host today. Next slide, please. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CSIA, we are a global nonprofit professional association with over 500 member companies in 40 countries. Our mission is to advance the practice of control system integration to benefit our members and their clients. Our vision is to ensure that manufacturing and process industries everywhere have access to low risk, safe, and successful application of automation technology. CSI membership offers members access to resources needed to attain and exceed business goals. To highlight just a few of our many member benefits, the CSIA Best Practices Manual guides control system integration companies in the setup and running of a solid company. CSIA Business Insurance Program offers members an excellent insurance program for business owners, subcontractors, and more. The program includes members from all over the world enjoying the peace of mind that comes with CSIA insurance. Clients in all industries are now seeking integrators with a CSIA certification alongside ISO. They recognize CSIA certified integrators' commitment to industry standards and business acumen. As a result, being certified can shorten the sales cycle. CSIA Industrial Automation Exchange is the premier automation guide featuring system integrators and suppliers who provide industrial, manufacturing, and process automation solutions. For integrators and suppliers, it's a place to market their expertise. Clients will find white papers, case studies, capabilities, contact information, and engage in conversation directly with CSIA members. Please follow CSIA's online events calendars for all upcoming webinars. CSIA webinars are opportunities given to CSIA industry partners to address hot topics and demonstrate their expertise. You won't want to miss these opportunities to learn from the comfort of your own office or home. And for more information about CSIA, please visit our website or contact us at info@staff.controlsys.org. or 847-686-2245. And at this time, I would like to introduce our presenters. It's our very own Jack and Don Roberts from Exotek, LLC. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Colin. All right. Just confirm you can see my slides now?
Yes, you are good to go.
Awesome. Well, hello everybody, and Happy New Year. I know it's kind of tumultuous times around the world, but appreciate you taking the time to be with us today to talk about how you can improve your business practices. As the new year begins, we actually find it's an excellent time for our clients to assess their current business practices in order to optimize them and become more efficient moving forward. So today we'll offer some specific recommendations on how to take inventory of your business practices, as well as how you can then document them and benchmark them so we can find out what we're doing well and where we need to improve. We wanted to start by talking about this entrepreneur's dilemma in this book called EMIS, which we would certainly recommend for you. It's a story that we hear all too often from our clients. As depicted in the upper right, a technical entrepreneur starts his business, adds engineers as project work increases, the business grows to a point where he can't manage everything. He's the face of the business who must stand in front of the client and say, trust me, me and my team will get this job done. And then he hustles back to ensure that all the technical solutions are sound and the projects stay on track. And then often he's burning the midnight oil and long weekends to manage the other aspects of the business. For those of you who've started your own business, it might sound familiar. The solution is to recognize that we, as the entrepreneurs and business owners, actually begin to constrain our own business. So we need to define our business processes and practices so that we can delegate that responsibility while ensuring that they are done to our satisfaction. If you want to see more about this journey that we have in the upper right, we do have a presentation called the Common Hurdles presentation that's in the resources section of our website.
Hey, Jack, if I could jump onto that a little bit.
Yeah.
A couple of things like that Common Hurdles one. I love doing that presentation because, well, I love doing it live, face-to-face. This virtual, I'm not sure about. But when we're doing it face-to-face, we do the presentation, we talk about each of the hurdles. And by the time we're finished that presentation, I can pretty much tell the size of every company in the room, because when we get to a specific hurdle, people lean forward and they're nodding their heads and they're really paying attention, because that's pretty much where they're at in that hurdle. So I only use that as an example that, you know, this stuff is just so consistent, consistent across the world, consistent across different businesses as well. And then I thought I'd just touch base a little bit on the other slide, the other graphic there. It's called Rule of by Company Size. So we're doing a lot of work with the Pulse data set, which is the information that is collected in the strat planning, or in the statistics group of CSIA. And one of the things that popped out really strongly is there's this concept of a rule of where company growth rate, revenue percent growth, and their, let's say, profit or EBITDA or whatever, when you combine those two percentages and use that and define that as being, okay, these are good companies, right? Sort of leader of the pack. And when I looked at the group of companies that we were considering, when all of that group went through 10 million, they all took a dip in either growth or profitability. So it's just another one of those sorts of things that reinforces what we've seen time and time again, is that you're going to run into these hurdles. When you run into the hurdles, you know, look at our hurdles presentation or whatever to try and get some information on how to get through that quickly.
Great, thanks for that, Don. And just a little bit more about that E-Myth Revisited book. The E actually doesn't stand for electronics, like you might think, but for entrepreneur. It's this myth or this fable that is told about the mental blocks that keeps this entrepreneur from seeing his business for what it is and being able to grow it beyond his own limitations. So it's a quick read. I think it's an excellent book, so I highly recommend it. All right. First of all, when considering our business processes framework, there are actually many models out there. Obviously, with this audience, the CSIA best practices is the perfect fit. For our other clients, we also refer to what we call our basic model, business acumen for system integration companies. So if you're on our website, you may see this graphic that describes the elements of a system integration business. It begins at the top with solid general management, providing the strategic planning and organizational structure required for the company. Under that, secondly, is we must have good people management to execute on our strategies and our plans. In the heart of what we call the diamond, we have on the left, the process starts with good marketing and sales practices to create optimal clients and opportunities. In the middle, you have the project and technical management methodologies to execute those projects successfully. And at the end, the service and support once that solution is delivered. All of that must be underpinned with good financial and process management. You know, for each of these elements, we can help you implement proven approaches. So you have the ability and confidence to take concrete steps to equip your business for the future. For ideas in any of these specific areas, you can check out the resources section of our website. You might also consider signing up for our blog to get notified as we add more content. All right, now before diving into actually improving our processes, let's talk about establishing what we call a process for our processes. I know that sounds redundant, but it's a good idea to first determine how we will document and how we will treat our core processes. If you haven't determined a starting point for that, we do recommend using the CSIA best practices or our basic model as the starting point. The next most important decision is how we will document these practices. Believe us, we see this all the time. You can save yourself some time and heartache if you agree to a documentation format for these processes. That could be a Word template, could be an Excel spreadsheet, or a visual tool like Visio. Likely it'll be a combination of tools, but identifying and kind of creating some standard templates will eliminate a lot of rework down the road.
Hey, Jack, what were you working on yesterday?
we were eating our own dog food. Don and I were spending time doing exactly this, defining for ourselves, even as a small consulting company, how are we going to document our processes to make them repeatable and successful.
I think there's a great example. There's an integrator that we were working with. This goes back a number of years, but when we first went in and took a look at them, I actually did a CSIA audit on them. They just got through the audit basically, and their approach was that, you know what, we came from large organizations and we did not like the bureaucracy. We didn't like the red tape. We just wanted to have a little company with no rules. We just get stuff done. And so it effectively was an engineer's playground. And we talked about that as we were going through the audit. Small enough company, so they managed to squeak through. And they said, yeah, no, this is what we want to do. Roll the clock forward a little bit, 2 or 3 years. They ran into some problems with clients, and the clients that they were dealing with were large government clients. So this was significant, right? The vendors that they were representing started to get uncomfortable, and we went back in and reviewed some of their processes. And at that point in time, they realized that, yeah, you know what, we just can't fly by the seat of our pants anymore. And so one of the leaders of the company, or two partners, one of the leaders of the company took it upon himself to document all their processes. And they actually used, like that Visio diagram up in the upper left, they used a method like that. And actually that was their intranet homepage. So anybody wanted to figure out, okay, well, how do I do a functional requirements spec? They just clicked on the box and it took them right to the documentation. So it worked out really, really well. Turned the company around. Customers got very, very, very comfortable working with them, particularly, like I said, government ones. And then, roll the clock forward even a little bit further. They were so successful, their company was bought out, and the individual that did all this actually went into that same role at the company that bought them. So it's difficult to get on this bandwagon of documenting your processes, but I can tell you, once you get onto it, you'll find that it is so much more efficient. And engineers, being as lazy as they are, they just want to find the easiest way to get work done.
Right. Thanks for that, Don. It's always good to kind of put it in context. So the other 2 points on this slide, I want to hit on those. Beyond defining the documentation process, you don't want it to just be a set of documents that just, once they're documented, they'll lay there. And it's really, just capturing what you're currently doing before moving forward. So we need to consider, what we're going to improve these, how we're going to improve these practices ongoingly. What is our continuing improvement process? At a minimum, we highly recommend you should define how often you need to review each of the defined business practices. So as you define them, say, yeah, we want to revisit this annually, or once every 3 years. Not prescriptive on how often you have to do it. It really is your own comfort level. But as the business grows, your practices will need to continue to be improved. And so think that out as well as you start on this journey. The other thing is have a corrective action plan. How are we going to hold ourselves accountable to following our defined practices? Not only do we need to have a way to periodically review and audit whether the practices have been followed, but we need to also have a way for our employees to report when something hasn't been followed so we can review what happened and take corrective actions.
Yeah, Jack, we've done a number of webinars and workshops around documenting processes, and a couple of things that stand out from it. One is when you document your processes when you get started. Don't try and boil the ocean, and I think we'll hit on that again a little bit further. But during the webinars, we tell people about the importance of having a procedure for writing procedures, and people look at us like we've got, 3 eyes or something like that. But what happened to me one time, about a year and a half after we did a workshop on it, a guy come up to me and said, Don, I've got a bit of a complaint about that workshop. And I said, oh, what was that? And he says, well, you mentioned that we should write a procedure for writing procedures. And you brought it up a couple times, but you didn't really stress it enough. And my feedback is that you really, really need to stress that a lot, because we ended up not taking that advice. We wrote up a bunch of procedures, realized we're missing a whole bunch of stuff. And it wasn't until we actually wrote a procedure for writing procedures that we were actually to get a lot more traction. So yeah, I like to write the procedure. How am I going to improve on it? And what do I do if somebody doesn't follow it? It's a great 3-legged stool. All
right. Awesome. Thanks, Don. Okay. So with that kind of framework for this process, for our processes, we now have kind of the foundation that we need in place. So the next thing to do, or first thing after that, is to take inventory of our current processes. So for each area of the business, first, does a process even exist? And I guess even if it does exist, perhaps even think about whether it should exist. And if the process does exist, how is it currently understood? Has it already been documented somewhere, or is it just tribal knowledge? Next, we should consider the stability and scalability of that process. So does it reliably meet our current needs? Is it repeatable? Is it scalable to meet our future needs?
Jack, I want to point out to the attendees here, these pictures are not stock pictures. These are actual pictures that I've taken when I'm touring around with some of our clients. The one in the lower left is the client's project methodology, and they just breadboarded it up and used Post-its to kind of give a sense of, okay, well, what are all of the steps of the processes and the inputs and outputs to it. The one in the upper right is their attempt to try and say, okay, we've got all of these different forms that we need to fill out and everything like that. And then this is their entire process for their business, literally stuck on a wall in a hallway, so that they could then take a look at it and say, yeah, does all of this make sense?
All right. After this initial inventorying, we're ready to perform a gap analysis to prioritize the areas we want to address. But as a backdrop, we should establish some ground rules so we don't try to boil the ocean. So let's start with how much time we're willing to invest in our best practices effort. How much money and how much time can we afford to invest in these activities? And perhaps just as important, what is the cost if we don't? Really, as we get into these, you want to treat your best practices effort as a project and have it prioritized right along the side of your customer projects, because we certainly see a lot of times that the customer is always more important and you don't get the results you need in your best practice effort because you fail to carve out the time and make it a priority for your organization. With respect to each identified gap, we need to also think about how big of an issue is it. Probably the litmus test is, will it keep us from executing today or prevent our effectiveness in the future? Essentially, what is the ROI if we apply resources to improving that practice? Finally, how are these efforts tied to our strategic planning and execution? They should not be, they should be consistent with our strategic goals and objectives and have executive sponsorship. In our experience, if there's not leadership commitment, then the effort to do this work will struggle and ultimately fail. If it's deemed a priority by management, then the appropriate resources can be applied.
Yeah, and management support is more than just it's a line item on our budget or whatever. It really needs to be a commitment. Maybe the senior exec is not involved day to day, but they need to be absolutely committed to getting this done. And if you, as Jack talked about tying it to your strategic planning, if you use strategy maps or things of that nature, there's a whole section of the strategy map that is dedicated to internal processes and the importance of them. So I've seen a lot of people use that as a framework from the executives to say, okay, here's the processes that are critical to our business, and part of our progress is going to be moving forward on some of those processes. So build it right into their strategy documents.
Great. All right, so we've done our gap analysis, and then we can prioritize what, where we want to focus our time and our effort. And that may not always be the one with the greatest ROI. For instance, it may make sense to go after some lower hanging fruit. If the improvements are quick and easy to implement, then it may be worth just knocking those out first. For instance, what are some highly repetitive tasks that we can easily document for the benefit of everyone in the organization? That will not only give us and our people practice in documentation effort, but also gives kind of a sense of accomplishment before taking on more complex problems. Next, we kind of suggest that you tackle what we call a more doable area. Perhaps we see a lot of people want to start with project management. It's something that's core to their system integrators' success, and one that must be defined and be repeatable to ensure consistent execution for our clients. So, that's a good area. Don, I know you think about finances.
Yeah, well, the thing about financial processes is they're highly repetitive, right? You go through a month end every month, and so it's easy enough to document a process and then test it. And within a couple quarters, you've really refined it pretty well. So I kind of like that. The other neat thing about tackling that is you get experience in documenting your processes without disrupting any operations. So it's if you find yourself really, really busy and say, well, I really don't know if I want to tackle this now because I'm too busy, this is an area where you can probably make some pretty good progress and get some experience and not impact your ability to get panels out the door, if you will.
Yeah. So I don't think there's a right or wrong about focusing on a particular area, but sometimes that's the easiest way to get traction is to find that doable area. I know I'm currently working with a client in Lebanon, and they want to get CSIA certified. They're looking at the whole gamut of things, but they actually came to me and said, can we just focus on the project management section of the CSI best practices, and we went through the internal audit to kind of score them where they were today, and then now we're going to work on flushing that out first, and then we'll gradually extend our assistance for them to the extent that they need it in other areas. But it gives them that doable area that they feel is the most important, and they can kind of develop their muscles on documenting practices and then extend it to other parts of the organization.
Yeah, one of the other things to consider is when we started looking at the CSIA certification, one way we filtered out some of the best practices that were in the best practices manual is we said, what are those practices that have the biggest impact on client satisfaction? So that may be another way you might want to look at it is where do we add the most value to our clients, and how do we provide that satisfaction and making sure that those processes are consistently followed across your organization?
All right. So now we're ready to roll up our sleeves and get started on actually documenting these practices. Our first piece of advice is to this KISS some people say it's keep it simple, stupid. Probably a little more politically correct these days is probably to say keep it simple and short and specific. The point is to document our as-is process. We frequently see people make the mistake of wanting to invent practices along the way. It often leads to confusion or worse yet, kind of loss of momentum in this effort. So we recommend not trying to invent a new or improved practice at the beginning. Rather, first capture what we're currently doing and then rely on our continuous improvement process to make those incremental changes.
Yeah, if we go back to the comments we made right at the beginning, a procedure for writing procedures and a procedure for how to improve those procedures. I think it's probably a bigger issue here in our industry than any other one, where we just want to fix stuff, right? So as we're documenting a process, we say, this is nonsense. We shouldn't be doing it like this. Let's fix this. If you take that approach, I will almost guarantee that you won't get to the end. It's much better to say, okay, what do we do now? Let's get that documented. Okay, over here, what do we do now? Let's get that documented. I think one of the other components to this that to keep in mind is just how to engage your organization. So I was talking to a very large integrator at one point in time, and we're talking about their best practices, their procedures, if you will. And they had a beautiful document. It was absolutely gorgeous. Every single procedure in their organization was defined, all written out, training manuals, the whole gamut on it, right? And so I said, "Wow, this is pretty impressive." And he says, "Yeah, and we sell it to our competitors." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we have no problem selling this to our competitors. As a matter of fact, it really helps us out a lot." And I'm thinking, well, okay, this is the secret sauce on how you actually run your company. And he said, "Yes. However, when we sell it to our competitors spend so much time trying to morph their culture and their behavior into our practices that they all but destroy their own company." And so the guy was using it as a sort of a competitive, Trojan horse, exactly, and it was effective.
Wow. Yeah, so we actually, recommend going the other way. We encourage you to actually enroll your own people in the process. Not only they know what the real process is, but they also know whether what is being documented is realistic and practical. Just as important, they'll feel ownership of the process rather than having it something that you're foisting on them that they have to adopt. They feel like they're getting to say for themselves what their practice is and then improve that practice area. And it seems silly, but another piece of advice is to actually give it a name. When you think about it, we're defining our unique way of doing business. It should be a source of pride for us and our employees. Even something that eventually we see this all the time. You start promoting it to your clients, like this is why we're unique. We have these defined practices. We can guarantee your success because we have taken the time to formalize our processes. CSIA certification comes behind that can help validate that. So it should be something. Something that is named and an important asset in your organization.
Yeah, use 3-letter acronyms because that seems to be popular.
All right. Next, let's consider how we're going to monitor our progress in this effort of documenting our best practices. As with any project, we talked about making this, considering it as a project. It's good to have definable, achievable goals, and what are the expected deliverables for this project? What are the milestones for this project? And perhaps most importantly, who is accountable for getting them done? I just can't emphasize enough that you should treat this effort as an internal project, assign a project owner, schedule progress meetings, and execute it. It's the only difference is in this case, you're the client.
Yeah, Jack, I was just looking through the list of attendees, and on the slide, the flow chart with swim lanes on the right hand side there. There's actually one of the people that's in attendance here that would probably recognize it and would actually be able to read it because it is. I picked it specifically because it was in a non-English language. Um, Getting back to the importance of the setting this up as a project and getting the using your talents as project managers and stuff like that to actually move this through. It's a pretty critical component. It needs to be as important as any other client project. It just happens to be that the client is your own company. So I think using those tools is a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. And beyond, just capturing our practices, we should think about and be able to measure our results. Once defined, what ways do we have to measure the effectiveness? And should we choose to improve them, how will we measure that improvement? Ideally, these metrics, at least for the key processes, should be baked into our KPIs. Because if we're not keeping score, how are we, determining whether we're actually winning? Metrics kind of keep us honest on our progress and our performance. So here are 3 questions that you should be asking yourselves. What is the measure to be used? What is the target that we want to get to? And what action do we need to take to reach that target?
Jack, I touched on this, or we touched on this earlier about stitching things into strategic plans. And part of the strategy map process is a balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard very much says, what's our objective? How are we going to measure it out? What's our target that we're going to be shooting for? And then what specific steps are we going to take? So you can start to see how all of this starts to tie together. Here's my strategy for my company, and here's how I'm going to actually deliver on accomplishing that through documented procedures.
Yeah, I like the graphic in the lower left. Referred to it in other presentations in the past. It's from a client of ours in India, and this was their dashboard, their KPIs, and one of them was project management, and it was red. So I asked the person who was responsible for keeping this up to date. They actually affectionately called her the evil metrics woman, and she said, "Well, that is red if it's green if all the projects are on time and on budget and on schedule." And I said, "Wow, has that ever been green?" And she said, "No." And I've said, I don't know if it's a good metric, if it's not achievable. So it's just an example of, so you don't want to have your team feel defeated if you're making unrealistic goals or metrics. It should be something achievable. There may be stretch goals, but you do want them to, have a sense of success as this goes along. All right. In addition to monitoring our own performance, we may want to then benchmark our performance against others by comparing ourselves to industry standards like CSIA or best of class folks within our industry. We can further assess where there's further need for improvement. Note, it's less about competing with others and more about competing with ourselves. How can we become best of class? That can provide further motivation for ourselves and for our people, and it will inspire us for further innovation within our own businesses.
Yeah, if anybody should get benchmarking, surely it should be most systems integrators that are right into MES systems and analysis and things of that nature. As a matter of fact, I've seen a number of integrators that have used their SCADA systems for their benchmarking analysis or LabVIEW for doing. I believe that previous graphic was done in LabVIEW, for instance.
Yeah. It was, yeah, and I'll say that this concept of your company is really a set of projects is an interesting way to think about it. It really kind of ties all the way back. You'll see this in the EMIS book if you end up reading that. Is you actually start thinking about your business as this thing, this projects of projects, and then how can we go to work on improving it? Really get yourself out and above the business, so to speak, and going to work on the business rather than working in the business. So back to benchmarking, there's a number of ways that we can help you benchmark your services. You can ask us as an industry expert in this case, to review your own business. We've literally engaged hundreds of system integrators around the world, and we can provide you feedback on how you measure up based on our experience with other clients. For this community, we can rely on CSIA best practices and certification. Don mentioned CSIA Pulse earlier, which tracks key statistics that you can use for further comparison of your business and company performance. I'll put in a plug for Exotek peer groups. We find that now more than ever, our clients are looking to network with their peers to learn from each other. And then our peer groups, certainly there's exchanges of ideas on how are you doing this, and you can get an idea of whether your peers, how well you match up to them, and that can inspire you and give you ideas on how to improve your practices. And then finally, another resource that we're providing for our clients is what we call our quarterly State of the Industry report, which you can find again in our resource center. And if you sign up for the blog, you can get notified of it automatically. But quarterly, we take industry information, distill it from a number of different resources, and put that in your hands. And again, that can help you kind of chart your future, kind of know where you stand relative in the industry, and some of our clients get valuable information from that.
Yeah, I'm going to push that pulse thing again a little bit harder. I know Jose's on the line here. We're hoping to see a document come out that gives you like a 4 to 5 year history of our industry. And this is just specifically from the CSIA Pulse program. Great information there. It is really, I've done a lot of the analysis on it, and it's kind of amazing how you can see companies that embrace certain processes and procedures and really do exceptionally well, and those that just kind of do okay. They survive, but they're not really growing all that much. And then that's a great spot to compare yourself against our industry. But as Jack said, when we put out that state of the industry, we look at a much broader spectrum. It's a little bit like what Alan Bolio does with the ITR trends, and how much everybody appreciates it. So we look at a CEO report, a purchasing managers index. We go in and look at a bunch of the different major vendors and try and get some sense of what they're doing in the industry. So it just helps you get some sense of, well, what are other people seeing? Is it just me that's doing real well, or is that the whole industry doing really well?
Yeah. All right. Hopefully we've provided you some useful information on how to improve your business practices. We often tell our clients that it's just as important to be working on your business as it is to be working in it. If we don't carve out our time to document and improve our business practices, then we won't be able to grow that business to meet our goals and better serve our clients. And if we don't, someone else will. So start simple and get help if you need. We can certainly try to help you get oriented and get going and along the way. Secondly, we talked some about kind of having the proper mindset when you go after this. The truth is, we don't always know what we don't know. So getting an external perspective and basing our efforts on industry standards is very worthwhile. And there needs to be what we call the growth mindset, that there's always more to be learned. This isn't a one and done effort. There's a level of effort certainly to get things documented first, but as we've talked about, the continuous improvement is a never ending process. There's always the opportunity to learn more and that'll lead to future growth and success. And finally, I'll say that there's kind of this potential that you can consider with this effort by improving our own processes. We're setting ourselves up for future success, so there's potential in that. And Don, I know you've seen many times that there's a actual leadership development potential here as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of development. So we were working with a company that let me just say they're in the 30 to $50 million range. And as we were going through, and they're in a peer group, as we were going through some of their internal processes, we noticed that there was about $5 million sitting on the balance sheet that could have been better used, and they very quickly went and tweaked their processes to improve on it. That's a pretty good sized company that is still looking at continuous improvement and paid huge dividends by doing that. Leadership development. Yeah, so one of the integrators we worked with brought in a leader from outside the industry, and this was like a plant manager kind of individual that they brought in to ultimately run their operations, if you will. When they brought that person in, they didn't stick them into the leadership position right away. What they did was they said, okay, Fred, your job is going to be to make sure that all our processes are documented and up to date. So the Fred took 2 years of just going through their organization and making sure that their processes were documented, followed, up to date. It gave Fred the opportunity to meet all of the people in the organization. It gave him a really good understanding of where there were some weaknesses or areas for improvement. So when Fred ultimately got moved into the leadership role that he was intended for, which was like 2 years down the road, then he had relationships built. He had a good, clear understanding of where he could add the most value. So that's one example. That's hitting it from the top end. Another example is where integrators will use the process of documenting their processes as an onboarding technique. So when a new hire comes on board, their first job is to tackle a particular area of the company, document the current processes, and get it into the continuous improvement mechanism. Similarly, using the new hires as part of your internal audit team. They don't have to know what the processes are. They just need to know that the individual project manager said that this is a process I'm going to follow. They can go and check and see, did that process actually get followed? If not, why not? Let's put it into the continuous improvement. So lots of different ways that this can be used beyond just documenting your processes or procedures, but use it for employee development as well.
All right, that kind of wraps things up. I guess we can open it up for questions. Don, did you see anything come in from the chat or?
I haven't. So guys, just feel free to jump into the chat and key in some questions if you have some. We're happy to keep going.
Don, I know we've given this presentation before, and one of the questions that we got was, what evidence do we have that documenting your processes actually delivers results?
Sure, and I kind of hit on one there in the previous slide where it was that was significant, a $5 million positive hit to the bottom line for that company. But another area where we're seeing it is I mentioned that we're doing this pulse data analysis that's going back 4 to 5 years. And when I look at it, the companies that are the best performers in that data set are CSIA certified. There's an extremely high percentage of them are certified companies. So it's pretty, in my mind, yeah, that's a pretty good evidence that when you go through the effort of documenting your process and then have somebody else come in and check it and validate it, it will pay dividends.
We also, if you have, since we have a little time in the chat, if something that we've said that particularly resonated with you, a takeaway or an idea that you've gotten from this, we're always interested to you get that feedback about something that really struck you that you're going to take away and execute on.
Yeah, I'd love to see some people just say the one thing. This is the one thing that I'm going to take away. Get that into the chat. It helps us, fine tune our message and focus in on the things that are important to you. So if you can, by all means, just a couple words really would help. We've got a quiet group.
Everybody, this is Jose Rivera, and if you allow me, I would like to make a short comment. So first, it's like thank you very much for this excellent presentation. We have a good attendance, and this is like a great way to kick our virtual event series for the year. A year where we will not be able to meet in person as we normally have done at our conference. But I think that we are all learning to leverage and gain all this knowledge that we're delivering through this virtual event. So thank you very much. I would say that this was also a motivating virtual event for me, watching it and thinking about my business. I run the association of CSIA, and like system integrators, we have procedures, and this gave me motivation to go into reviewing some of the procedures that we have and creating ones where I feel that we don't have them. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Jose, we kind of alluded to this ourselves, but we try to hold ourselves accountable to the same things that we're preaching to our clients. So, even though we're a relatively small consulting company, but by comparison to many of our clients, we still try to follow the same thing, best practices recommendations that we're making to our clients. So it's challenge. We recognize it's challenging at times, but yeah. Just literally yesterday, Don and I were focusing on this. What is our process for documenting our processes? How can we bring certain areas, not all areas of our business, but where are we going to get the greatest return on bringing our processes under control and make sure that value to the client is as consistently strong as possible.
Yeah, there's a question from Dave McKenna. I know Dave well, so this is kind of one of those zinger questions. So he says, why do you prefer to not document practices as you change them? Isn't it a way to avoid boiling the ocean? So Dave, what we're suggesting is capture what your current process is in the standard format as best as you can, and then utilize your continuous improvement process to actually change it. So the document you have that is my current process might actually not live for very long. It could be that it gets replaced within a few months, but you at least capture that, and then you have that foundation to work from. It does a couple of things. It exercises your procedure for writing procedures, but it also exercises your continuous improvement process. So we like to just separate it out into those two different pillars. And I hope you pulled over to type that in. Do you have recommendations for methodologies or practices for organizing, storing these, as well as software systems? Yes, he did pull over. That's a really good question, and to a certain extent, that was a lot of what we were Jack and I were working on yesterday. So, one of the procedures that tends to get pushed a little bit further down the road is configuration management, and it tends to be a bit confusing, and I'm not exactly sure why it needs to be as confusing as it is. But yeah, in terms of how you store things, where you store things, how you move it from one stage to another stage, when is it released, when is it not released, and what are the best tools? I know we are quite heavily using SharePoint and OneDrive tied to that. Other people are using things like Tortoise and different tools to Subversion tools to do store it that way. But I think we're finding SharePoint's got a lot of the revision tracking system in it that is necessary for us to be successful at it.
Yeah, Don, I'll just add, this is another example in my mind where treating it as a project, as a customer project is useful. What are you doing for your customers, and then use that process for yourself. It's a good place to get started, at least.
Anybody else? Well, one of the things I mentioned earlier, and I just noticed looking through the list, it was a great list of international clients from literally all over the world. So that's always rewarding too.
Yeah. All right, that's really what we had today. I know these are our kind of 4 pillars or 4 core areas of offerings for our clients. We focused a lot of time today on that improving business practices area, but we also have offerings for helping you with strategic planning execution, empowering your leaders, and networking with your peers. I just recently posted something on the control CSIA forum about this, but we really have seen an increased demand for peers and peer groups. So that is an area that if you're looking to get into a peer group, then reach out to us, and we can help you find the right group as well.
Yeah, especially with all the turmoil going on, we've moved some of our peer groups from quarterly to weekly. It's been beneficial for the members.
Hey, Don and Jack, we have a raised hand. It's Pat Miller.
Mr. Miller, congratulations, by the way.
Give me 1 second here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes,
you, Mr.
sir.
Miller.
Oh, I always want to say something. This is really wonderful. I hope everybody's getting a kick out of it like I have. But my question is, I have a problem with my people coming to at the end of each project to find out whether we made money on that project, money, and why. And it's like pulling teeth. And the answer is, oh, we're making money as a company. What are we worrying about each project for? And I'm saying, wait a minute. Everyone either adds or subtracts to the bottom line. Why aren't we getting into each project and finding out what we did right and what we did wrong, and how can we change it moving forward? And so I'm having a difficulty getting buy-in from the troops. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, other than kicking more ass,
Kick more ass. Yeah, Grandpa, I've got a couple of comments on that. One of them is that, Jack mentioned a little bit earlier on, in effect, our companies are collections of projects. So it's really the focus on the individual projects. The company is just going to be the sum of all that. So I would not want people to be worrying about the company as a whole. That's your job. The company is going to be when I add all these projects up together. So every single one of those projects need to be a success. And if they're not being a success, then they're not pulling their weight. I just can't stress enough the importance of getting the focus where they can influence it the most, and that is done at the project level. In terms of waiting till the end of the project to find out that they're not going to be successful, yeah, your project managers should be able to pick up on that sooner. A lot of times that happens if you don't do sufficient work breakdown structure, right? So I was working with a client that their smallest task was 1,000 hours. I'm saying, how do you possibly manage that, right? And they were running into that same problem. So making sure that your project managers break the project down into bite-sized chunks, whether that's 40 or 60 or 80 hours, whatever the size, the maximum sizes you want, and then comparing performance against that. We talked about what's the measure, or is it dollars or is it hours or whatever.
Don, I'll just add to that because this came up in one of our project management peer groups recently, where there was this discussion about do you just emphasize individual project success, and there was actually some hesitancy and experience in negative effects of doing that, if you focus solely on individual project success and don't consider the overall company success, you can get project managers that will make decisions that aren't in the best interest of the company just to make their project successful. So it is a little bit of this dance of, but it's really the answer is both. You need to focus on the overall health of all your projects collectively, as well as have an emphasis on individual project success.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, tying it to your strategy for sure. But Q&A.
Yep, there was one that jumped in the Q&A.
Okay, this is a comment. Do you want to get that? It was just a comment about individual. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I'm not sure if everybody's able to see that, but just a nice comment that somebody thought it was a great presentation and been consulting in quality management systems for over 30 years and thought we hit on a lot of the points to have broad application across many organizations. So it's used the techniques that we've recommended with good success in all sizes of company.
All right, well, if that is it for the questions, on behalf of CSIA, I would like to thank Jack and Don for this informative discussion, and I would like to thank all of those attending. This webinar will be recorded and will be up on the CSIA archives page by the end of the week. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you, Jack. Thanks, Don. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Have a good day.
All right, bye now.